The night air hung thick and heavy, a suffocating blanket of humidity that clung to my skin like a second layer. The incessant drone of cicadas filled my ears, nearly drowning out the sound of my own ragged breathing as I stumbled through the dense undergrowth of the Louisiana Bayou. My heart pounded in my chest, threatening to burst through my rib cage with each frantic beat. I couldn't remember how long I'd been running, but I knew I couldn't stop. Not now, not ever. The moonlight filtered through the twisted branches of the cypress trees, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and writhe with a life of their own. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves sent a jolt of terror through my body. I was being hunted, pursued by something that shouldn't exist outside of nightmares and horror stories. But this was no nightmare. This was real, and the creature that stalked me through the swamp was far more terrifying than anything my mind could have conjured in its darkest moments. I'm Lucas, and this is my story. A tale of horror and survival that began on what should have been an ordinary night in the bayou. A night that would change my life forever and leave me questioning everything I thought I knew about the world and the creatures that inhabit it. It had started as a simple camping trip, a chance to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and reconnect with nature. I'd always loved the bayou. Despite its reputation for danger and mystery, there was something alluring about its wild, untamed beauty, the way it seemed to exist in a world apart from our own. I'd set up camp on a small patch of dry land, surrounded by the murky waters of the swamp. As night fell, I sat by my campfire, listening to the sounds of the bayou and watching the stars emerge in the clear sky above. It was peaceful, serene even. But that serenity was about to be shattered in the most horrific way imaginable. The first sign that something was wrong came when the night suddenly went silent. The constant chorus of frogs and insects that had been my companions since sunset abruptly ceased, leaving an unnatural quiet in its wake. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a chill ran down my spine despite the oppressive heat. Then I heard it, a low guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. Not quite animal, not quite human. My breath caught in my throat as I slowly turned, scanning the darkness beyond the circle of firelight. Two eyes glowed in the shadows, reflecting the flickering flames. They were yellow, feral, filled with a hunger that made my blood run cold. I froze, hoping against hope that if I didn't move, whatever creature those eyes belonged to would lose interest and move on. I couldn't have been more wrong. With a snarl that sounded like it came straight from the depths of hell, the creature burst from the undergrowth. In the split second before terror overwhelmed me, I caught a glimpse of what pursued me. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall when standing on its hind legs. Coarse, dark fur covered its muscular body, and its hands, what if you could call them that, ended in razor-sharp claws that looked capable of tearing through flesh and bone with ease. But it was the face that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. It was a twisted amalgamation of wolf and man, with a elongated snout filled with gleaming fangs and eyes that burned with an intelligence that had no place in a mere animal. This was a werewolf, a creature of legend brought to terrifying life before my very eyes. I ran. There was no thought, no plan. Pure, primal instinct took over, and I fled into the darkness of the bayou. I could hear it behind me, crashing through the underbrush, its hot breath seemingly always at my heels. Branches whipped at my face. Thorns tore at my clothes and skin, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't. To stop was to die. As I ran, my mind raced with questions. How was this possible? Werewolves were myths, stories told around campfires to scare children. They weren't real. They couldn't be real. But the creature pursuing me was undeniably, horrifyingly real. I don't know how long I ran before I stumbled upon the old trapper's cabin. It loomed out of the darkness, a dilapidated structure that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Under normal circumstances, I would have given it a wide berth. But with death snapping at my heels, it represented my only hope for survival. I crashed through the rotting door, slamming it shut behind me and frantically searching for something, anything, to barricade it. An old heavy table sat in the corner, and with strength born of desperation, I managed to drag it in front of the door. No sooner had I done so than the cabin shook with the impact of the werewolf hurling itself against the walls. Wood creaked and groaned under the assault, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the creature found a way in. My eyes darted around the cabin, searching for a weapon, an escape route, anything that might give me a chance at survival. That's when I saw it, an old rifle hanging on the wall. My heart leapt with hope as I grabbed it, only to sink again when I realized it was unloaded. The werewolf's attacks on the cabin intensified, and I could hear wood splintering. It was going to break through at any moment. In a panic, I searched the cabin for ammunition, tearing through drawers and cupboards. Just as I was about to give up hope, my hand closed around a small box. Inside were 3 bullets, old and tarnished, but they fit the rifle. With shaking hands, I loaded the weapon, praying that it would still fire after all these years. The wall to my left exploded inward in a shower of splinters and debris. The werewolf's massive form filled the opening, its yellow eyes fixed on me with predatory intensity. Time seemed to slow as it tensed, preparing to lunge. I raised the rifle, took aim, and pulled the trigger. The gun roared to life, the sound deafening in the confined space of the cabin. The werewolf jerked as the bullet struck it, but to my horror, it didn't go down. Instead, it let out a howl of pain and rage that shook me to my very core. I fired again, and again the bullet found its mark. The creature staggered, but remained standing. 1 bullet left. 1 chance to survive this nightmare. As the werewolf gathered itself for a final attack, I aimed carefully, knowing that my life depended on this shot. Time seemed to stand still as I squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the werewolf square between the eyes. For a moment it stood there, swaying slightly. Then with a whimper that sounded almost human, it collapsed to the floor. I didn't move for what felt like hours, the rifle still trained on the motionless form of the creature. Slowly, cautiously, I approached it. As I watched, something incredible happened. The fur began to recede, the muzzle shortened, and the claws retracted. Where the werewolf had fallen now lay the body of a man, naked, middle-aged, and very dead. The transformation I had just witnessed defied everything I thought I knew about the world. My mind reeled, struggling to process what had happened. But I knew I couldn't stay here. The shot would have been heard for miles in the quiet of the bayou, and I had no idea if there were more of these creatures out there. With one last look at the body on the floor, I fled the cabin and plunged back into the night. The rest of that night was a blur of fear and exhaustion. I ran until my legs gave out, then crawled, always pushing forward, always listening for the sound of pursuit. When dawn finally broke, I found myself on the outskirts of a small town. I stumbled into the local sheriff's office, babbling about werewolves and monsters in the swamp. They didn't believe me, of course. How could they? My story was the ravings of a madman, a tale too fantastic to be true. They wrote it off as a bad reaction to something I must have eaten or drunk in the bayou. Maybe even a hallucination brought on by swamp gas. But I knew the truth. I had seen it with my own eyes, felt the hot breath of the creature on my neck as it chased me through the night. The terror was real, and it had changed me forever. In the days and weeks that followed, I tried to put the incident behind me. I returned to my life in the city, threw myself into my work, and did everything I could to forget that night in the bayou. But the memories haunted me. Every shadow held the potential for horror. Every full moon filled me with a nameless dread. I became obsessed with researching werewolf lore, scouring old books and internet forums for any information I could find. Most of it was clearly fiction, but here and there, I found accounts that rang true, that echoed my own experience in ways that sent chills down my spine. It was during this research that I stumbled upon a name that would lead me down an even darker path. Marie Laveau, the voodoo queen of New Orleans, a figure shrouded in mystery and legend. According to some of the more obscure sources I found, she had dealings with creatures of the night, including werewolves. The rational part of my mind told me it was nonsense, that I was grasping at straws in an attempt to make sense of something that defied explanation. But the part of me that had run through the bayou that night, that had looked into the eyes of a monster and lived to tell the tale, couldn't let it go. Against my better judgment, I found myself drawn back to Louisiana, to the streets of New Orleans where Marie Laveau had once held court. I told myself I was just there to continue my research, to try and find some closure. But deep down, I knew I was looking for answers, for some way to confirm that I wasn't losing my mind. New Orleans was a city steeped in history and mystery, where the line between the natural and supernatural seemed blurred at the best of times. As I walked its streets, I could almost feel the weight of centuries pressing down on me, the whispers of secrets long buried but never truly forgotten. My search led me to an old voodoo shop in the French Quarter, a place that reeked of incense and secrets. The proprietor, an ancient woman with eyes that seemed to look right through me, listened to my story without comment. When I finished, she disappeared into the back of the shop, returning with a small leather-bound book. "This belonged to Marie," she said, her voice crackling with age. "It speaks of the creatures you seek and of the curse that creates them. But be warned, child, some knowledge comes at a terrible price." I should have heeded her warning. I should have walked away right then and there, gone back to my life and tried to forget everything that had happened. But the need to know, to understand, was too strong. I bought the book and retreated to my hotel room to study its contents. The book was written in a mixture of French and what I assumed was Creole, with diagrams and symbols I didn't recognize scattered throughout its pages. It took me days to decipher even a fraction of its contents, but what I learned chilled me to the bone. According to Marie Laveau's writings, the werewolves of Louisiana were the result of an ancient curse laid upon a group of settlers who had desecrated a sacred voodoo site. The curse bound man and wolf together in an unholy union, creating creatures driven by bloodlust and rage. But it was the method of transmission that truly horrified me. The curse could be passed on through a bite, yes, but also through a scratch, or even through contact with the blood of an infected individual. I thought back to that night in the bayou, to the branches that had whipped at my face as I ran, to the thorns that had torn at my skin. With trembling hands, I examined myself in the mirror, searching for any sign of the curse. Had I been infected without realizing it? Was I destined to become one of those monsters, to lose myself to the beast within when the full moon rose? As if in answer to my fears, I felt a sharp pain in my side. Lifting my shirt, I saw a long, jagged scratch that I didn't remember getting. It looked inflamed, angry, and as I watched, I could have sworn I saw something moving beneath my skin. Panic overwhelmed me. I had to get out of the city, away from people. I couldn't risk hurting anyone if the worst happened. In a frenzy, I threw my belongings into a bag and fled the hotel, not even bothering to check out. I drove for hours, heading deep into the bayou country, away from civilization. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Was I imagining things, letting my fear and paranoia get the best of me? Or was I truly infected, doomed to become the very thing that had nearly killed me? As night fell, I found myself back in the swamp, surrounded by the eerie sounds and shifting shadows that had haunted my nightmares for months. The pain in my side had intensified, spreading through my body like fire in my veins. I stumbled through the undergrowth, no longer certain of where I was or where I was going. The moon rose full and bright, bathing the bayou in its silvery light. And as its rays touched my skin, I felt something awaken inside me. It was a hunger, a rage, a desire to hunt and kill that threatened to overwhelm my humanity. I fell to my knees, my body racked with spasms. I could feel my bones shifting, elongating, my muscles swelling and changing. Fur sprouted from my skin, coarse and dark, my face contorted, my jaw extending into a muzzle filled with razor-sharp teeth. The transformation was agony, every cell in my body screaming as it was remade into something monstrous. But worse than the physical pain was the mental anguish, the feeling of my human consciousness being subsumed by something ancient and predatory. When it was over, I stood on 4 legs, my senses overwhelmed by the sounds and smells of the bayou. The part of me that was still Lucas was horrified, trapped inside the mind of a beast. But that horror was quickly drowned out by the wolf's hunger, its desire to hunt and kill. I ran through the swamp, reveling in my new strength and speed. The scent of prey filled my nostrils, driving me forward with single-minded purpose. In the distance, I heard voices, campers perhaps, or fishermen who had strayed too far from safety. The human part of me tried to resist, to turn away from the innocent lives that lay ahead. But the wolf was too strong, its bloodlust too powerful to deny. I charged forward, a nightmare made flesh, ready to feast on those unfortunate enough to cross my path. What happened next is a blur of violence and blood. I remember the screams, the desperate attempts to flee, the sickening crunch of bones beneath my powerful jaws. When I finally regained control of myself, as the moon set and my body painfully returned to its human form, I was surrounded by carnage. The guilt and horror of what I had done threatened to drive me mad. I had become the very monster I had feared, had taken innocent lives in a frenzy of bloodlust and rage. There could be no redemption for me, no return to the life I had known before. As the sun rose over the bayou, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I made a decision. I couldn't allow myself to hurt anyone else. I couldn't risk passing on this curse, this terrible affliction that had destroyed my life and the lives of those I had killed. With heavy steps, I made my way deeper into the swamp, to places where humans rarely ventured. This would be my home now, my prison. Here I could keep the world safe from the monster I had become, living out my days in solitude and regret. But even as I resigned myself to this fate, a small part of me clung to hope. Hope that somewhere out there might be a cure for this curse. Hope that one day I might find a way to reclaim my humanity and make amends for the horrors I had wrought. Until that day comes, if it ever does, I remain here in the shadows of the bayou, a creature of nightmare, a cautionary tale whispered around campfires, the werewolf of Louisiana, forever caught between man and beast, between the world of light and the realm of shadows. To those who might stumble upon this account, let it serve as a warning. The bayou holds secrets darker than you can imagine, creatures that defy explanation or understanding. If you value your life, your very soul, stay away from these cursed lands. For once the shadows of the swamp have touched you, you may never truly escape their grasp. As for me, Lucas, once a man and now a monster, I can only hope that my story serves some purpose, that it might prevent others from suffering the fate that has befallen me. And perhaps in the telling of this tale, I can hold on to some small shred of my humanity, even as the beast within me grows stronger with each passing moon. The bayou calls to me now, its dark waters and twisted trees offering the only home I can ever know again. I go to meet my fate, whatever it may be. May God have mercy on my soul, for I fear nothing else will.